Chapter 97. Slytherins are Slytherins. I suppose he finally wanted to retire from Hogwarts, Harry said, staring at the head table in the hopes of developing spontaneous legitimacy. What do you mean? Asked Ron. Well, no one lasts at the defense job, do they? Maybe, Harry thought darkly. Snape figured Harry would get him killed before the end of the year. Harry had been doing a good job of it so far. He might just go back to teaching potions at the end of the year, said Ron reasonably. That Slughorn bloke might not want to stay long-term. Moody didn't. He said he might retire at the end of my time in school if we all survived, Harry said, keeping his voice down. Couldn't tell if he was telling me I'd drive him into an early grave or saying he wanted to have more free time for the apprenticeship, honestly. A beat of uneasy silence fell. I can't believe Filch banned my candy, Harry added, since he didn't want the conversation to stay dead. They're perfectly safe. He probably minds the ones that make you blow bubbles, foam at the mouth, or go blind, Ron pointed out. The blindness is a side effect, Harry protested. Those aren't even for sale yet. You went blind once a week all summer, Ron told him. Trust me, everyone noticed. You really shouldn't test unmonitored potions on yourself, Harry, Hermione said, for the 1000th time. I'm getting pretty good at moving around without being able to see, Harry protested. I thought you said it was an unwanted side effect, asked Hermione. Well, I don't want it, but I do know it's there, Harry said. This did not draw much applause. Harry was truly, deeply uncomfortable with Professor Snape teaching the dark arts defense against the. He wanted Professor Snape to be teaching potions, where he belonged, not giving a love lecture about darkness, unfixed, mutating, indestructible. It made Harry want to scream, which made him want to be sarcastic. It was not a good combination. Harry wasn't even slightly startled. He got detention in his very first class. As for Professor Slughorn teaching potions, well, the less said about it the better. Well, perhaps one thing that occurred just before Harry's first potions class of the year. Professor Snape entered the classroom in deep conversation with Professor Slughorn, who seemed somewhat uncomfortable. Potter, may I see your textbook? Professor Snape asked. Yes, sir, Harry said, and handed it over. Flipping Harry's copy off Advanced Potion Making, Professor Snape used it as a bludgeon, rhetorically speaking, to demolish an argument of Professor Slughorn's. He then swept away, obviously inspecting the room. Professor Slughorn pretended he didn't exist to address the class. Potter, your book. Harry accepted the textbook from his professor and blinked at it. This was not the same book. It was a battered second-hand copy. He glanced up at his teacher's unreadable dark eyes and decided not to ask, certainly not in company. Harry turned back to Slughorn's lecture, quite as if nothing had happened. As was his habit, he let Hermione answer the questions, though he completed them in his head. Veritaserum, Polyjuice, Amortentia. He'd never tried brewing Veritaserum or Amortentia, having decided many years ago to avoid love potions. He had a sudden inclination to try his hand at Veritaserum, though, looking at it. Felix Felicis, well, that was just motivating. Harry recognized the handwriting that had nearly obliterated the original recipe in his textbook with a soaring, swooping feeling. And Professor Snape wondered why Harry would plunge headlong into danger after him. Honestly. Once they were securely ensconced at the Gryffindor table for dinner, however, he felt safe enough to tell them. It's Professor Snape's old book, I think, he explained. He gave it to me. Blast, muttered Ron. Well, I can't hate him anymore, can I? Harry had to laugh. You can still hate him. I think Hermione's on board, isn't she? I don't understand why they don't update the textbooks, she said mournfully. May I see it? Harry resisted the urge to snarl at her. I think it's an apprenticeship thing, Harry tried, trying to sound regretful. Her eyes flashed. You're not the only one who can get an apprenticeship, Harry Potter. Harry went very still, on the theory that if he was quiet he might escape from the lions. "But who would you ask?" asked Ron. "Snape and McGonagall are already taken. No one takes more than one apprentice at a time." "I suppose I'll have to figure it out," said Hermione. Harry would not want to be the subject of Hermione's figuring out for love, nor money. "Who wants to practice silent casting with me?" he asked the table in general. "Professor Snape will be extra sarcastic if I haven't made progress by next class." "That sounds like a job for the day," Hermione said in her most innocent voice. "I'll call a meeting, shall I?" Harry was regretting this already. It was a little less thrilling having the day reassemble without the looming threat of Umbridge discovering it. Still, Hermione never had stopped a good idea once she'd had it, and Harry did need to learn silent casting, so they sent out a call on the charmed coins on Wednesday night. And then Draco Malfoy turned up at the room of requirement. Harry stared at him, standing with his hand on the door. Draco, coming down the hallway, stalled to a halt. "What are you doing here?" "What are you doing here?" "Isn't it obvious?" Harry huffed a breath. Sure, he looked incredulous. "You're not joining the de Malfoy. No way." Malfoy smiled slowly, though it didn't reach his pale eyes. "Surely, Potter, you are aware of Hogwarts rules about clubs. Open to all students of all years and houses, or they're illegal." Harry ground his teeth. "It is a legitimate club, isn't it, Potter?" "Right," Harry gritted. "Come in, then." Absolutely zero people were happy to see Draco. Not one. Draco seemed happy to ignore this, stretching. "So, when do I get to hex you, Potter?" "We're practicing silent casting. You can practice with Greg." "Oh, fine." And that, apparently, was that. Except that Draco picked up silent casting faster than Harry did, which was just not on at all. Ginny silently getting him in the back, with a bat boogie hex, was pretty wonderful. Harry checked with Professor McGonagall if he had to let Draco into the day. He had to let Draco into the day. Harry settled for the simple expedient of never, ever telling Draco when the meetings were happening. It didn't work. Harry suspected Greg of playing traitor. Harry sought out Professor Snape on Saturday afternoon, since his evening had been claimed by Professor Dumbledore, and found him in his old office. It was very strange to have some things change, and some things stay exactly the same. "I don't like Professor Slughorn." "Nor should you. He is a coward who happens to be capable of following a recipe." "Sit, idiot." Harry took a seat. "I am no longer your potions professor." "Yes, sir." "You will continue to excel at potions and find opportunities to practice." "Yes, sir." "I trust you have prepared a study plan." "I want to try to make Veritaserum, sir. I think it would be useful, and I need to make another batch of Polyjuice. I used mine up this summer." "I heard about that. Next time, prepare a disguise less recognizable than Draco Malfoy." Someone knocked on the closed door, and then it opened. "Yes, do, Potter," drawled Draco from behind him. "I don't want to be dragged into your mess." "Mr. Malfoy," Professor Snape said neutrally, "what can I do for you?" "I was hoping to speak to you regarding Potter here, sir. I don't think you should waste your time with him. I doubt he's good for your health." Snape smiled slightly. "Now, I wonder where you got that impression." "I overheard Potter gossiping about you last spring, sir," Draco said casually. "I don't think he's very respectful." "I, too, have given up hope on Potter ever learning respect." Snape paused, delicately. "I am always available to any of my students who need help, Mr. Malfoy." Draco drew himself up, chin lifting, posture suddenly tense. "Keep helping Potter, then," he snapped. "He's hopeless, after all." Draco slammed the door behind him. "Potter," Snape said thoughtfully, "I believe I shall take this afternoon to demonstrate defensive wards against entry and eavesdropping." It was an interesting demonstration, even if Harry burned with questions. What had they been talking about? Slytherins, arg. Chapter 98. Harry has no context for this. After watching The Memory of the Gaunts and discussing it with Professor Dumbledore, Harry had two last-minute questions. But that Larket. Yes, Sirius informed me of it. In fact, I assisted him in its destruction, which forms a part of our puzzle. But we must proceed in order, Harry, or we will have nothing but a tangle of strings instead of a cat's cradle. And what about Professor Snape, sir? Would it be all right if I discussed this with him? No, Harry. I believe it best to avoid putting more pressure on Severus this year than he is already under. Another secret he must keep from Voldemort would not be doing him a kindness. Is he safe, sir? None of us are safe in these times, Harry, but I am doing everything I can for him. Thanks, Professor. And it was time for Harry to go for the evening. Harry was very glad Hermione was his friend, but he wished she had a little more sympathy when he was complaining about lessons. Honestly, Harry, if you never master silent casting, how are you going to manage really advanced magics like wandless magic? I just don't see why it takes up so much time. There's potions I could be working on, you know, and the Quidditch team and Professor Snape's decided to pay attention to my defensive spells. Hermione sniffed. Sometimes I think Professor Snape is right, and you really are arrogant, Harry. Hermione, you're the best in our year at potions and the best at defense. You don't have to be so. Why can't you just be happy? Harry opened his mouth and closed it again. I don't have time to breathe, Hermione. I really don't. When I did that, you all just told me to drop a subject, she said brutally. Harry stood up abruptly. Harry, if you master the charm, I'll tell you why you should master silent, wandless magic. Curious, Harry decided to stick around, even if he mostly wanted to chuck all his homework out the common room window. The sun had set, and Hermione was yawning along with him. Good night, Harry. The greatest wizards like Merlin or Dumbledore, they can fly without broomsticks. Harry took that thought to bed, to turn over in his mind as if he was a niffler with a galleon. Flying, really flying, not just apparating or sitting on a broomstick or a hover charm. Harry fell asleep and dreamed of flying. Harry was doing his transfiguration homework in the library during a free period with Greg and Luna when Draco spoke from over his shoulder. Everything you just wrote is wrong, Potter. Well, that makes sense. I've got no idea what she's talking about most of the time. Draco snorted. All right, Draco, asked Greg. Harry, startled, glanced back at Draco to see why Greg would ask that, only to catch Draco shimmering into a cat and launching himself at Greg's chest. Greg caught him easily, holding the little cat with gentle expertise and stroking his ears. The cat was fluffed up as if it had just spotted a rival, pupils narrow, ears slicked back. Said Harry. Greg settled back in his seat, seeming content to let Draco curl up in his lap and stroke Draco's ears while working laboriously through what one could loosely term an essay, if you allowed for block lettering and Greg's feelings about grammar. Greg met Harry's eyes when Harry opened his mouth. Leave it. I said, leave it, Greg growled, and Harry was abruptly reminded that Greg and Draco were still, probably, possibly friends. They were certainly still roommates. When Harry got up for next period, he saw Greg tucking a small, unprotesting white shape into his large pocket. Harry was really worried about whatever was up with Draco Malfoy. Dear Harry, I suppose I should start off by saying that I may have told the Prime Minister of England that you were my son. I suppose I should explain that one. I was reading your last letter, and I'll get to that in a minute, and he asked what I was reading. So I thought about lying, decided not to, and managed to stammer my way into calling you my son, not my suavest hour. I know I'm not James. In the interest of diplomatic relations, though, if the Muggle government asks. Anyway, about Snape. I agree it's worrying that he's teaching dark arts, especially with the way you describe him starting the first class. He's always been too into it, a bit the way you are with potions. But potions don't drive you mad and leave you going on homicidal rampages, usually. A few warning signs to watch for: pale skin, mood swings, mania or depression, increased sadism, reliance on magic when your hands or feet would do, eye color changes. I honestly couldn't tell you how to tell with Snape, though, since he already has all of those. I talked to Dumbledore. If you grow increasingly concerned, he'll know what to look for and how to fire him most efficiently. Professor Snape was not precisely avoiding Harry. Harry was not precisely avoiding Professor Snape. Still, without potions classes or regular extracurricular lessons, they did see less of each other over the first few weeks of term. Harry was not impressed with Professor Slughorn precisely because Professor Slughorn was constantly impressed with Harry. Harry was tempted to mess up his potions deliberately just to stop the avaricious glint in the potion's master's eye, but it probably wouldn't have worked anyway. On the second Saturday of term, Harry had his proper detention with Professor Snape. "Flabberworms?" Harry asked, once he reached Professor Snape's office. "If you finish in good time, we will discuss other possibilities." Harry got on with sorting rotten flabberworms and contemplated pouring some of them over his professor's head. Professor Snape calmly got on with grading. It was late when Harry finished, and Professor Snape waved him to a seat after Harry had washed his hands. "You brought your textbook?" "Yes, sir." Snape pushed what appeared to be a catalogue across the table. From the Diagon Alley apothecary, Harry saw when he picked it up. "I no longer have unrestricted access to the Hogwarts potions cupboards, so we will be making alternate arrangements. Go through that and choose the ingredients you will need for batches of polyjuice and veritaserum, as well as whatever you will need for those ridiculous sweets of yours, and for our continued attempt to make sense of your Myrtle failure." "We're going to have to come up with a better name for it than Myrtle failure," Harry muttered, but bent his head to his textbook and his catalogue, fighting off a yawn. It took basically forever. "Now, as Sirius Black is your guardian, the normal approach would be apply to him for funds," Snape continued. Harry froze. "However, I enjoy having reasons to belittle him, so I will be doing my part as your master to supply you with the relevant tools while he is off gallivanting with muggles." After a few moments, Snape took the catalogue from Harry's numb fingers. "You're dismissed." Harry was really not quite sure what just happened. Chapter 99, The Party. Harry and Hermione got into some arguments about copying Snape's spells that he'd noted in the margins, because as she pointed out in hurried whispers, Snape had gone dark for a while, hadn't he? And they didn't know what age he'd started. It's not like any of them were helpfully labeled dark magic, now were they? Harry didn't give his book up, obviously, but it wasn't the most peaceful addition to Gryffindor Tower. Ron mostly thought it was odd that Snape called himself a prince. Not exactly the most princely person, was he? In the end, it was Draco who came to Harry, rather than Harry successfully pinning down Draco for their little chat, on a Saturday night in October after the first Hogsmeade trip. Harry, who had been preoccupied by whoever cursed Katie Bell and tried to smuggle a dark object into Hogwarts, almost didn't see him. He was perched on Greg's shoulder as a cat, a position he'd occupied more and more between classes over the past few weeks. "Are you too good to walk places on your own?" Harry asked the cat, as he tried to edge around Greg to leave the dining hall. Greg did not allow himself to be edged. Harry, who had been preoccupied with Draco all day, stopped moving. His instincts were screaming that this was Draco's doing, that Draco had used Thempiriuscus on Katie, and that Draco had bought the necklace. But everyone else seemed to think that he was mad, that Draco wasn't a Death Eater, that there was an innocent explanation. That Draco had been doing transfiguration tutoring, and that wasn't just him having a convenient alibi. Harry would really love for there to be an innocent explanation. After a few seconds with them, all staring at each other, Draco jumped down from Greg's shoulder and turned human. "We're having a party, Potter. Come along." "Yes, keep up." "Harry, everything okay?" asked Ron, coming up beside them. "Yes, fine," Harry said. Ron hadn't exactly been supportive of Harry's theories after all. It was a chance to investigate. "See you upstairs." Harry nodded. "In a bit." Draco beckoned, and with Draco in front of him and Greg lurking behind, Harry found himself trailing up the stairs to the room of requirement. Draco did the pacing, and they entered through a solid-looking wooden door that had, yes, bars on the inside of the door. This was going wonderfully, so far. Greg pulled double handfuls of bottles of butterbeer out of his pockets and set them on a round table in the center of the room. Harry was beginning to get the impression that Greg was copying Harry's theory on pockets. The more the better, the deeper the better, the end. The room was dark, lit only by a fireplace, and old couches surrounded the battered round table. Harry sat on one of the couches, where he could watch both of them warily. Draco eyed him right back, grey eyes assessing. "Greg, you may go," Draco said. "I think Harry would rather talk to me alone." "Is that right?" Greg asked. "Yeah," Harry said. It's not like he'd have any luck getting Draco to be honest with a witness, even one so trustworthy as Greg. "G-night," Greg grunted and left the room. Draco bolted the door. "Being a bit paranoid, aren't you?" "I learned from Professor Crouch too, you know. Hominem revelo." They were the only people in the room. Harry sighed. "I know anti-intruder and anti-eavesdropper spells, if you're going to be like this." "Please go ahead." So Harry cast the spells and kept his wand out, just in case this was a particularly arcane assassination plot. "Sit," Draco added after a minute. Harry sat. Draco opened 2 butterbeers, poured his into a glass, and took a sip. "Cheers," he said. "To your horrible relatives, may they rot in hell." Somehow, I wasn't expecting this. I'll have a drink with Greg when his father snuffs it, and I'll have a drink with you tonight. I just had to wait until someone could go get some butterbeer. Draco opened another bottle of butterbeer, poured it into the other glass, and slid the glass across the table. "It's not wine, but it's passable. You hated them. We're celebrating that they're dead. You don't have to admit it to anyone else." "Come on, Harry," Draco said with a smile. "You think I'll judge?" Harry did not think Draco would judge. He picked up the glass of butterbeer and stared at it. "Let me see if I'm summarizing this correctly. You're happy they're gone. Happy you never have to see them again. Ecstatic Sirius Black got custody of you legally because it means you have a real family. And you can't say any of that to anyone because you feel so bloody guilty about being the reason people die." Harry took a big gulp of butterbeer. "And tomorrow," Draco continued brutally, "you can go back to feeling guilty and horrible and like the weight of the world is on your shoulders. Tonight, we are going to have a party because you hated them and they're dead." Harry took a more controlled sip of butterbeer. "I'm here to talk to you about Katie Bell." "Then you'll have to stick around for your party, won't you? Nice timing." "Relax, drink. I hear it's what people do at parties." "Aren't parties supposed to have music?" And suddenly there was a lacquered box on the table. Draco grinned and opened it, and a soft operetta began to play. "You have crap taste in music," Harry told him frankly. "And you are a peasant, as usual. I expect you like Muggle music." "Well, yes." Draco sighed. "I'll talk about my feelings," Harry said, "if you show me." "You know what I'm talking about, Draco. Your arm." Draco blinked at him, grey eyes cool and distant, expression a faint snarl. "You first, then Harry." Harry twisted his glass of butterbeer in his hands and listened to the music for a while. "I think," he said after a while, "that if he wanted to give me appreant, he should have let me make the choice myself. He chose whether to kill his own father. He wouldn't have liked it if someone else had done it for him. You think that's why he did it? He signed the name he shared with his father on the letter. He used to provoke my uncle into breaking the wards. It wasn't exactly subtle. But on the other hand, said Draco, he was rather cross with you at the time. Harry snorted. Rather cross. I'm sure that's one way to put it. I'm trying to be subtle in my language. Good job. Really good job. What you do to Katie Bell. I'm sure I don't know what you mean. I have nothing against Katie Bell. Harry drank the last of his butterbeer and threw the glass across the room, where it shattered. Draco jumped half a foot. Don't play that game with me, Malfoy. Then don't ask idiotic questions. I'm not going to Azkaban for your entertainment, Potter. They both fell silent. The music kept play. Draco, after a few moments, conjured up another glass for Harry and slid it across the table. Harry poured himself more butterbeer. They deserved better than to be reduced to a footnote in my biography, Harry said. They weren't perfect. They were bloody awful, really, no sense of humor, terrified of foreigners and jokes and anyone different and me. But granted that you aren't happy they're dead. Anything you'd like to say? I'll never get a chance to hex Uncle Vernon unconscious, or punch him in the face, or all the other things I used to dream about doing. I'll never be able to tell Aunt Petunia I don't need her charity anymore. That I regret. If you want someone to go with you to yell at their graves, I play a mean cat. Harry grinned humorlessly and drank some more butterbeer. Draco unbuttoned his cuff and rolled up his sleeve, bearing the dark tattoo on his forearm, black and angry. Harry tried to avoid staring. Did it hurt? That, Harry thought, was a yes. You're in trouble. The Dark Lord, Draco said precisely, is not pleased with my father. Harry thought about that one. Not exactly a state secret, that. Draco smiled thinly and rebuttoned his cuff. No, not exactly a state secret. Here's one that might be. I'm supposed to keep a close eye on Professor Snape this year. Harry put his glass down and stared at it hard. It held no answers. Still won't go to Dumbledore? He asked after a minute. And what exactly would I tell my parents? Father didn't put his heart and soul into this for me too. Abandon him when he needs me. My parents' area live, Harry. I'm going to stop you, whatever you're doing. Maybe. I'm quite subtle these days, you know. And Professor Snape calls me arrogant. Today wasn't subtle. Today, from what I've heard, was indeed not subtle. Harry frowned at him, but Draco's bland expression told him nothing. You, Harry said precisely, are incredibly suspicious. Auras should lock you up on sight. Thank you, Harry. Harry could have left then, but he didn't. Instead, he talked about Uncle Vernon and Aunt Petunia. He talked about Dudley getting a new tricycle, while Harry made friends with a spider because Dudley scared the other children away. He talked about setting a boa constrictor on Dudley. He talked about how he and Aunt Petunia had almost been getting along, by never being in the same room. He drank a lot of butterbeer, and Draco asked quiet questions, and eventually, far past curfew, they went their separate ways to bed. Chapter 100. Conversation by the Dark of the Moon. Harry let things slide, of course. He had too many things on his plate not to. His letters to Sirius were short and to the point, if warm and full of teasing. He came to only some of the meetings of the day, preferring to let it become a little less centered on him, and a bit more of the older students tutoring the younger ones who were trailing in. When he got a revised version of his monograph back in the morning post from Professor Snape, he revised it in snatches without really thinking about it too much. Hedda left trying out the slug club for later. Hermione, despite Ron and Harry's mild efforts to talk her out of the apprenticeship idea, seemed to have decided that she should study for a mastery without the benefit of a master. But what are you doing? Harry asked, looking helplessly at the new piles of viciously dry-looking tomes surrounding Hermione on that particular evening. Ward making and wizarding law, Hermione said, sucking on a peppermint. I couldn't decide. Did you know there's no such thing as a wizard lawyer? Harry considered the trials he'd seen, which certainly had seemed to lack lawyers. He wasn't sure that lawyers would have improved them much. Which areas of law? Control of magical creatures, of course. Buckbeak, Witherwings, Darby and the House Elves, of course. And criminal law concerning the dark arts, she added. Harry glared at her. If this is a competition to see which of us can go mad first, I won last year. But actually, is that one of my peppermints? Hermione smiled at him. I didn't buy it from Fred and George's shop, Harry. You gave me these over the summer when I asked. I don't remember. You were a little distracted. Harry decided to see if Ron wanted to go play Quidditch, instead of continuing to harass Hermione about her life choices. She could, after all, probably handle it. Maybe he'd just stop bothering her about the Malfoy problem, take it off her list. Trying to discuss Draco with Professor Dumbledore went precisely nowhere, so Harry decided his next step was Professor Snape. He knew Draco pretty well, didn't he? The next opportunity that presented itself for Harry to discuss it with him was the night of the new moon, which had become a standard night for them to venture out into the forest to collect this and that, according to what seemed to Harry mysterious whims. As was typical on outings when Professor Snape was not barking instructions, he allowed Harry to ramble on without much interruption, aside from a few pointed questions when he thought Harry was being particularly idiotic. I think Ron and Hermione might be thinking about going out, and I think I need to pin Draco down. About going out? Professor Snape asked, in a desert-dry voice. About being a Death Eater and almost getting Katie Bell killed, Harry said. Accusations of that nature against a fellow student. Shall I take points, Potter? I saw his dark mark, but I didn't get a confession about Katie. Professor Dumbledore said he was taking all appropriate steps to investigate. Then I suggest you trust Professor Dumbledore, Professor Snape said icily. Harry considered the suddenly frigid silence. I thought we all decided that we weren't going to keep things from me for no reason. That does not mean we will not keep things from you for a reason. Do you think you have the right to be informed of every aspect of the war? You have your own concerns, Potter. Name one. Quidditch. Professor, that's not fair. Improving your meager skills in spellcraft past the adolescent level. Professor Snape, Harry realized with a sinking feeling, was going on a tear. Wonderful. Your idiotic venture into capitalism, courtesy of the Weasley twins. I'm not doing much with that right now. Cease interrupting. Your studies with Professor Dumbledore, which are the best use of your time, and your attempt to master potions in as short a time as possible. And you think you have time to play prefect for Draco Malfoy. Harry waited in the faint light of Thirlumospell, but Professor Snape seemed to be done. He's in trouble. Many people are in trouble, Potter. Draco Malfoy makes his own trouble, as you well know. Harry said nothing, because he'd spotted a patch of white moonflowers, and now was a good time to harvest flowers and a bad time to respond to Professor Snape. You cannot go running across the country after every person in pain, Potter, Professor Snape said, sounding very tired. Professor Dumbledore wishes to keep the war from your door for just a little while longer while you prepare. The best and kindest thing you can do is to take all the time you can to prepare, as he wishes. It was Harry's turn to be chilly after that one, and they passed some interesting times stunning owls out of trees for a few feathers, and then Energetiture, avoiding the centaur herd. The problem is, Harry said carefully, after he was sure they wouldn't be kicked to death by angry centaurs, and that he could keep his temper, Draco isn't across the country, he's right here. And whether or not he thinks he's a criminal mastermind, he's really not. I'm almost certain he was involved with Katie's accident, and I'm certain he didn't mean to kill her. I cannot decipher, Professor Snape said in a colorless voice, still struggling to catch his breath after their run, if you are Draco Malfoy's friend or enemy. Harry sat down on a convenient rock to catch his breath. Professor Snape was leaning against a tree. The clearing was dead dark, which was somehow relaxing, though Harry was aware they'd been lucky to avoid spraining an ankle. Harry had a nasty set of scratches on his hand from something. He suspected blackberries, but if his hand turned purple, he was going to the hospital wing tomorrow. "We're friends," Harry said eventually. "We're on opposite sides of the war, and he might try to kill me someday, but we're friends. I might have to help lock him up in prison, though I don't think I could stand to kill him. I'd say, I don't know, honorable enemies. Except he's never met a concept of honor. He didn't want to stab in the back when it wasn't looking for efficiency's sake." That startled a bark of laughter from Professor Snape. "I am friends with his mother," Professor Snape said very quietly, "though her view of me is less fraught than Draco's view of you must be. I think she was worried about him this summer. I saw them in Diagon Alley." "You've chosen him as your latest target of investigation," Professor Snape said flatly, like a little terrier dog harrying its prey into the ground through sheer exhaustion. "No one's told me I'm wrong about him being involved with Katie Bell." Silence stretched between them. "You trust me," Professor Snape said. "You would not come into the dark of the Forbidden Forest with me at your back if you did not." A delicate pause. "Will it be sufficient for you to trust me in this, Potter, that I am aware of the situation and taking appropriate action?" "That's what Dumbledore said," Harry said, suddenly suspicious. "Appropriate actions." "One appropriate action is discussing the matter with the accused's head of house," Snape said smoothly. "So you want me to do nothing?" "Do nothing, say nothing. Restrain your impulse to dig and dig until you find yourself in a hole you cannot get out of." "I'll try. Will that do?" "That will do, idiot. Come along, we should go back to Hogwarts before dawn." There was a faint note of relief in Professor Snape's voice. Harry noted down, and then mentally chided himself for being unable to keep what was mostly a promise for more than 30 seconds. Chapter 101. Harry has a date. "Hermione," Harry said, one Wednesday evening before the first Quidditch match of the season, "do you have a minute?" "No," she smiled at him though and said, "but what is it?" "It's, this." Harry handed over a towering stack of parchment, bound together in red twine. "You said you wanted to proofread my monograph before it was printed, and Professor Snape says this is my last chance to make any changes. If you could try the recipes and see if they come out consistently with those instructions. Be careful about stray thoughts. That's how I ended up with one that ate varnish, and I don't know where it's ended up, but that's why Filch hates me now." Harry paused to take a breath. Hermione made a get-on-with-it gesture. "Anyway, I think I've mucked something up in the section about runic symbolism and possibilities of variation between the Norse and Germanic runic alphabets, so help." "I didn't really want to memorize wizarding inheritance law anyway," she said, pulling the monograph to her and dunking her quill in her inkwell. "Who are you going to get to print it?" The portrait door opened and Ron called, "Harry." "Yeah," Harry called back. Ron crawled in and came over to speak in a quick, panicked whisper. "Practice started 15 minutes ago. I told everyone to do drills, and then when they didn't listen to me, I told them, you appointed me assistant captain, and they had to do what I said. But I think there'll be a rebellion if you don't get out there in the rain with us." Harry blinked at him. "Oh, thank Merlin," Harry said after a minute. "Ron, you're my assistant captain in charge of schedules and training and plays, and Ron was gaping at him. "Basically everything," Harry concluded firmly. "I'll overrule you if I think I have to. I have been playing longer, but please." "But I'm rubbish," Ron protested. "I'm only on the team because there was no one better." "You're fantastic," Harry said firmly. "If I could just confund you to remember that, we'd be in business." Hermione was laughing at them. Harry did not appreciate it very much. Ginny Weasley was a problem. She was a veritebrae problem, but Harry hadn't been this distracted by Cho, not ever. Potter, defense had just ended. Malfoy was lurking in the background, so Harry just blinked at Professor Snape and said, "Yes, Professor. When I say that I expect your essay on Veritaserum on Monday evening, I do not mean Tuesday." Harry winced. "Explain." I was practicing my hexes, distracted, and it took me a while to wake up from being stunned. "And what distracted you?" Harry paused, but did not spontaneously melt through the floor and disappear. He managed to mumble something involving the word girl. "While you are my apprentice, you will never find yourself with time, Tardate. You will have to consider your priorities, or you will maim yourself when your attention wavers." Harry scowled. "Yes, sir." Ginny Weasley was definitely a problem. In another universe, Harry Potter implied to Ron that he was sharing Felix Felicis with him to help him get his head in gear about the Quidditch match against Slytherin. In this universe, Harry had long years of experience talking Ron or Hermione into trying potions, and had a sense of ethics about lying to people about what he was making them drink. In both universes, Gryffindor won the match. In both universes, this did not miraculously fix whatever was up between Ron and Hermione. Somehow, despite working on his monograph for more than a year, Harry still didn't actually believe it was done until he had the book, bound in plain green, in his hands. It was breakfast, and the owl post had arrived. An introduction to runic and life magics in cleansing potions by S. Snape and H. J. Potter was not anything very exciting to write home about, and Harry certainly hadn't enjoyed actual writing parts, which mostly made him feel self-conscious, but it was done. That was something. Then he got the for owls, each bearing letters with names he recognized from books, and wasn't that the uncle who invented the wolfsbane potion? He opened the first one. "Dear Harry Potter, impressed with this work at your age. Some questions. Perhaps you have considered the alternate correspondence of the death rune and lilies." He opened the next. "Dear Harry Potter, despite my skepticism, upon my attempt, hope your master has considered the folly of distracting you with this at this critical time. Wish you all the best of luck." The rest were like that, 2 old men and 1 woman who knew more than him, better than him, and included no return addresses. It was not, Harry realized, a good time to be a potions master in England. How Professor Snape had gotten them copies. Well, Harry had always thought owls were rather uncanny about the whole thing. One snowy morning in early December, Harry received a letter in nearly, entirely the same vein. "Dear Harry Potter, I chanced upon a copy of your monograph after having heard something about it through the grapevine. I thought it pleasantly concise and enjoyed that it did not attempt to do too much with the discovery. Congratulations. Upon further thought, I believe the key correspondence is not cleaning, but having an effect upon the physical realm, a mission. I suspect a growth potion, such as one might use in a garden, would be an effective candidate, though I do not currently have time to test my theory." The note was unsigned, but Harry recognized the handwriting from another letter last summer. He knew his mail was screened by the ministry, so it probably wasn't cursed. Still, it left him feeling awful somehow, even after he burned it. Harry found it personally offensive that people were trying to use love potions on him. But at least it was a nice change to brood about that instead of brooding about Voldemort, who was still in the papers murdering people, even as he wrote pleasant notes to Harry with no conception that Harry might not welcome his input. With all that in mind, it gave Harry great pleasure to toss any and all foodstuffs given to him out the tower window. This, admittedly, led to an unfortunate incident involving a third-year silly enough to eat chocolates that fell from the sky, but that's another story. In another universe, Harry asked Luna Lovegood to Slughorn's party. In this universe, Harry was aware that would have led to his swift murder at the hands of Greg Goyle, and didn't. "Harry Potter," said Professor Trelawney in deep, vibrant tones, noticing him for the first time. "Oh, hello," said Harry unenthusiastically. "My dear boy," she said in a very carrying whisper. "The rumors, the stories, the chosen one, of course, I have known for a very long time. The omens were never good, Harry. But why have you not returned to divination? For you, of all people, the subject is of the utmost importance." "Ah, Sybil, we all think our subject's most important," said a loud voice, and Slughorn appeared at Professor Trelawney's other side, his face very red, his velvet hat a little askew, a glass of mead in one hand and an enormous mince pie in the other. "But I don't think I've ever known such a natural at potions," said Slughorn, regarding Harry with a fond, if bloodshot, eye. "Instinctive, you know, like his mother. I've only ever taught a few with this kind of ability, I can tell you that, Sybil, why, even Severus." And to Harry's horror, Slughorn threw out an arm and seemed to scoop Snape out of thin air toward them. "Stop skulking and come and join us, Severus," hiccuped Slughorn happily. "I was just talking about Harry's exceptional potion making. Some credit must go to you, of course. You taught him for 5 years." Trapped, with Slughorn's arm around his shoulders, Snape looked down his hooked nose at Harry, his black eyes narrowed. "Anyone learns through enough repetition, eventually." "Oh, you're too modest, Severus. He's a credit to you, a credit. Why, I've never seen a better first attempt at a draft of living death. I am certain there is room for improvement. And I hear a rumor, that there is a monograph with the name H. J. Potter in circulation in select circles. I'm quite hurt not to have seen a copy, my boy." Harry tried to keep from hunching his shoulders and saying that he didn't think Slughorn would have had any useful comments. It didn't seem kind. "I've got a spare," Harry tried, "but it's just a bit of fun, really, nothing earth-shattering." "Nonsense, nonsense. Such potential. Why, you'll be creating the next Wolfsbane before we know it. Like your mother, a natural." "Professor Slughorn," Harry interrupted desperately, "I've been meaning to ask you a few questions about Veritaserum." But it was too late. He saw out of the corner of his eye Professor Snape's expression had already darkened. Professor Slughorn, Harry thought with great disgust, had all the diplomacy of an ugly brick thrown through a window into a china shop. As if Harry wanted people talking about his dead mother, let alone Professor Snape. A convenient distraction intervened, Draco Malfoy, being dragged by the ear toward them by Argus Filch. "Professor Slughorn," wheezed Filch, his jowls a-quiver and the maniacal light of mischief detection in his bulging eyes, "I discovered this boy lurking in an upstairs corridor. He claims to have been invited to your party and to have been delayed in setting out." "Did you issue him with an invitation?" Malfoy pulled himself free of Filch's grip, looking furious. Harry was really not sure what instinct compelled him, seeing the desperation under Draco's anger, to say, interrupting Draco before Draco could come up with some story, "He's on my invitation, professors." "Oh ho," said Slughorn, with a knowing and drunken grin. "As a friend," Harry hastily edited, backtracking, "not that we're friends, we're not at all, I just meant." "Honestly, Potter," Draco drawled, "I traded my help with his abysmal transfiguration grade for an invitation, if that satisfies all concerned." "That's all right, Argus, that's all right," said Slughorn, waving a hand. "It's Christmas, and it's not a crime to want to come to a party." For a moment, Harry caught a look of anger and fear on Snape's face, and wondered about it, and then felt guilty for wondering. Draco, meanwhile, moved smoothly to chat with Professor Slughorn, bracketing Harry on one side so he couldn't edge away. Harry would much prefer to have edged away. "I'd like a word with you, Draco," said Snape suddenly. "Now, Severus," said Slughorn, hiccuping again, "it's Christmas, don't be too hard, I'm his head of house, and I shall decide how hard or otherwise to be," said Snape curtly. "Follow me, Draco. I know what you're up to. You want to steal my glory." There was another pause, then Snape said coldly, "You are speaking like a child. I quite understand that your father's capture and imprisonment has upset you, but—" Harry had barely a second's warning. He heard Malfoy's footsteps on the other side of the door and flung himself out of the way just as it burst open. He reached out and grabbed Draco's arm, pulling him sharply against the wall and throwing the cloak over both of them. Draco, who'd been going for his wand, stilled, and they watched Professor Snape stalk away down the hall. Harry spoke once he was out of sight. "Come back to the party. Don't act more suspicious than you already are. You just don't want to lose your date. I'm not you. You're just lucky the only thing I need in a date is for them to stand there and look pretty," Draco said, patting his cheek condescendingly. "Just so you know, I'm not doing your transfiguration homework after this artful little bit of eavesdropping. Didn't really think you were, and you're not my date." Everyone thought Draco was Harry's date, and it was an absolute disaster. Draco chatted with everyone, Hermione looked at Harry very strangely, and Professor Slughorn kept giggling. Draco transfigured his robes into more elaborate, sparkly versions of themselves, and Harry wanted to die. Chapter 102, Wolfsbane. He didn't have time to talk about Snape and Draco's conversation with Ron and Hermione before Christmas break occurred, and Harry was swept home to Grimmauld Place to spend a few weeks with Sirius and Dudley. It left Harry antsy. It seemed like a nice way for Voldemort to back his teacher into a corner to Harry, ensuring that the double agent couldn't double agent about it. It was useful information, but it was also rather scary once he asked Sirius what an unbreakable vow was. Harry missed Ron and Hermione desperately, but they had families of their own to go home to. Dudley seemed much recovered from his summer storminess and had lost some weight. He was still tremendously fat, but Harry would have found it stranger if he wasn't. He talked to Harry about his new school and new friends and new clothes and new PlayStation until Harry was quite sure he would scream. But Harry did not scream and tried to look interested. Sirius only barely got away for Christmas, but Remus turned up for Christmas Eve and helped Harry decorate. Rather, helped Harry run herd on Creature, who had decided that the house should be decorated in old black style, which Harry knew would give Sirius some sort of horrid family flashbacks. Harry wanted the only horrid family flashbacks this Christmas to be his and Dudley's. On Christmas morning, Harry opened his presents with Sirius, Remus, and Dudley, and felt like his family was very strange and cobbled together from odd broken parts, but wonderful all the same. He got a letter by Owl, sitting in front of the kitchen fire, and tried not to cringe. Harry was not enjoying his mail very much lately. The handwriting, however, made him perk up. "What's that?" asked Sirius, around a bite of breakfast sausage. "Letter from Professor Snape. It's Harry grinned. "He's finally given me the recipe for wolfsbane." "You're learning to make wolfsbane?" asked Sirius into the sudden silence. "I've been working on it ever since third year," Harry said absently, reading the instructions. "He hasn't let me even see the full recipe until now, said I'd kill someone. He must have been all right with that batch of Veritaserum I made after all." Sirius swept Harry up into a giant hug, and Harry squeaked. "You're a good kid, Harry. A really good kid." Remus, Harry noticed, was looking away from them both. Harry had no idea what to do with this. "Can I read my recipe?" Go ahead. It's fiendishly complicated, right? It's mostly that any mistake could poison the, werewolf, thus the name. And of course it's dreadfully poisonous for the potion maker if they get it on their skin or breathe too many fumes. The trick is, that's complicated, Harry lost track of the conversation from there, but no one seemed to mind him being distracted. Conversation turned back to Professor Snape over lunchtime, but the wolfsbane recipe seemed to have convinced both Sirius and Remus that Professor Snape was really very misunderstood, and that things at Hogwarts couldn't be that bad. Harry did not find the conversation about what Remus had been up to all that much more reassuring, though at least Sirius had funny muggle stories, and a plan involving a new motorbike that had Remus talking sense into him for an hour, which they both seemed to enjoy very much. Harry rather thought that Remus had missed having Sirius around to talk sense into, rather as if Hermione had suddenly lacked him and Ron to scold into doing homework. It made him think about Hermione and Ron not talking, and suddenly Harry was back to being cross. He tried very hard not to be smug about getting more presents than Dudley. He really did. For Christmas dinner, they were joined by Tonks, though no one would tell Harry. She sat next to Remus, and Sirius kept shooting them little calculating looks when he thought no one was looking. It was good, Harry thought with fondness, that no one had ever thought Sirius should be a spy. Being around a grown-up witch girl had a delightfully tongue-tying effect on Dudley, and they weren't going to discuss order business over Christmas dinner, so they had ham and Harry asked Tonks about her work for the ministry. Creature, wearing his new embroidered tea towel with a flight of reindeer dancing on the front, asked Sirius, "Is Master ready for the second course?" "No, thanks, Creature," Sirius said, distracted by Tonks' tale. "Get more of the sides." Harry thought Creature looked very smug about having achieved orders and order out of the group, eating around the dining room table. Harry had decided that letting Creature fuss over his outfit for the day was easier than enduring Creature talking about barbarians for all of Christmas. Harry Weasel most certain Sirius hadn't noticed they were all being successfully bullied into manners by his house elf, with Harry's assistance. Harry mostly found Creature's relationship with Dudley hilarious, because Harry was probably a bad person. In another universe, the Minister of Magic used Percy Weasley as an excuse to meet Harry over Christmas. In this universe, there was no way anyone was letting him in on the secret of Harry's location. Instead, Harry had a celebratory row on Boxing Day with Dudley over Dudley breaking one of Harry's new presents, and Sirius sprayed them both with water like stray cats. Harry was beginning to get the impression he and Sirius would never have time to have that row about Harry's trip to the Department of Mysteries while the war was still on, because after that, Sirius had to go guard things again, leaving Harry and Dudley to sort themselves out. Harry told Hermione all about Draco and Snape as soon as he got back to school from Christmas, which left her looking very pale and saying she needed to research unbreakable vows before rushing out of the common room. Hermione, Harry thought, really needed to detach herself from the library before she grew roots like a tree. Harry did not tell Dumbledore about the conversation between Draco and Snape, because Harry knew that he had promised Professor Snape to trust him and stay out of it, and Harry was not the sort of person who gave the same person the same warning twice if it was not well received the first time. He was going to deal with Slughorn for the man, and that would have to do. Having the entire school think he was gay cut down some on the feminine ambushes, but Harry could have lived without Cormac McLaggen ambushing him for 101 great Quidditch saves by Cormac McLaggen. Want to get a drink? He couldn't even kill Draco over it, because it had been his stupid idea. Then there was the conversation with Ron. "Look, mate, I just wanted you to know it's all right if you like blokes. With me, as long as you don't like me. I mean that way." "Merlin, Ron, stop," Harry said, covering his face in both hands. "But you can't date Cormac McLaggen. He's a git, and I'll fight him. He wouldn't treat you right." "I'm not, Agril." "No, but you're." "I'm what?" Harry snarled. "It's my job to take care of you, isn't it? Make sure you're doing all right. That's what a best mate's for." "I'm not dating Cormac McLaggen." Ron gave him a doubtful look. "Ron, I empathize Closeto asking your sister out and hexing Dean Thomas into next week. That's how much I'm not dating Cormac McLaggen." Ron looked thoughtful. "I reckon that'd be all right. We could be properly brothers that way. I could ask Ginny if she still likes you." Harry tackled him, completely and utterly out of patience. It was not. Harry admitted privately to himself that he was disinterested in blokes. He'd never really thought about it one way or another. But he was pretty sure, the sort of person who only liked one person at a time, and for better or worse right now, that person was Ginny. Chapter 103. Draco chooses a side. Draco wants a word, Greg told Harry during a quiet moment in late January in the library. Astronomy Tower, tonight after curfew. He's going to get us both expelled, Harry muttered, and thought about not accepting the invitation all the rest of the day. At least until he asked Hermione what she thought, and she said he should definitely go, after all. Hadn't he been wondering what Draco had been up to? I sort of promised Professor Snape to leave it alone, Harry muttered. Oh, but he's got an unbreakable vow, Harry. Maybe you weren't really promising him so much as his promise. This had not previously occurred to Harry. It convinced him, frowning, to take the meeting. Harry brought his cloak and his map to the meeting, which meant explaining the map to Draco. Draco stared at him, looking like he hadn't been sleeping and possibly was being tortured, and said, "Sometimes I truly hate you. Do you know what I could do with that?" "Nothing I'd let you do," Harry said, "but it's not foolproof. If anyone catches us, we were snogging," Draco said lightly. "Oh, I'm sorry. Was your dignity more important than the war?" Harry grumbled to himself, and then they settled themselves for their chat, sitting next to each other with a view of the star-filled lake. Harry could see why people came up here to be romantic. Harry would have preferred to come up here someday with someone he was actually dating. "What do you want, Draco?" "Well, I had a homework assignment for the Christmas holidays. From Hermione, actually. She told me I had to figure out for myself which side of the war I was on, really, rather than trying to play every side." That makes sense. Harry decided to ask Hermione about it later, in detail. "But I can't stand any of them. Dumbledore's a sanctimonious prig who wouldn't throw me into a lake if I was on fire. The Dark Lord is crazy," Harry supplied. "You think so?" Draco asked softly. "I've gotten to know him pretty well the past year or so since he came back. He's not just arrogant, erratic, and prejudiced. He's not just a murderer. Some sort of something that's there in other people isn't there for him. He doesn't see where he goes wrong." Harry paused. "He wrote me a nice, congratulatory note on my monograph." "So," Draco said, rallying, "I would like you to join a side. My side. You be my second recruit after Greg." "No, that's stupid." Draco hissed between his teeth and stood. "Fine, fine. I don't know what I was thinking." "Sit down, Draco," Harry hurried to say. "I didn't mean I don't understand Thadia. Just sit down. Let me talk for a minute." Draco hovered undecided for a minute. Harry held very stilly. Draco sat back down. "I see why you'd want that," Harry said slowly. "But you're not. It wouldn't be your side. It'd be a side you were on. I know you are." He trailed off and decided to be blunt. "Your plans are terrible. If it were going to be anyone's side, based on who does the planning, it'd be Hermione's." "Hermione? You want me to be subordinate to that?" "Her, yes, because she's smarter than us and better at magic than us and better at planning than us. I can lead a fight, but I can't plan a war, Draco. That's not who I am." Draco was struggling with his temper. "You'll have to get used to it," Harry suggested, "for when she's Minister of Magic." "Hermione Granger." "Yep," Harry said with quiet humor. "Hermione Granger, Minister of Magic, Ronald Weasley, Chief Auror, Harry Potter, Master Potion Maker, and Draco Malfoy, Chief of the Wisengamot, like Dumbledore." Harry said agreeably. "Severus Snape, Headmaster of Hogwarts. He deserves it." "I don't disagree. I just don't know if he wants it. Consider, he'd be able to avoid students almost all the time." Harry had to admit, it was an idea. Hermione would say that I was in charge. That's what she did with the "I'm not working for Hermione." Draco paused. "And a lot of other purebloods wouldn't either." "You think I'll get other purebloods in this thing?" "The Ministry's worried about your political power. They're wrong, of course. You have no idea how to use it, but they are." Harry considered Draco, who was proud and unpleasant and occasionally helpful and looked spectacularly awful. The problem was, Harry really did have a saving people thing. And no matter how weirdly Draco was going about it, Draco was basically asking for help. Right, Harry said. Well, how much trouble will you be in if you just tell Voldemort to stuff it? Draco giggled, half hysterically. I'm in quite enough trouble stalling, thank you. Stalling isn't actually the worst plan. Hermione's. Need to have a talk with her. I mean, when you start listening to Hermione. Last year, when you had the Dark Lord in your mind, and I was going half mad with worry. You look half mad now. Christmas was not pleasant. Hermione said you told both Professor Snape and Professor Dumbledore I was acting suspicious, and they said they'd deal with it. They haven't. Harry swore inside his head, quite viciously. Hermione had quite a nasty lecture for me about collateral damage, so you can stop giving me that look. Right, going to tell me what this is all about, then. Right, well, you're trying to kill someone. I'm trying to Felto kill someone, in a way that can't be blamed on me, except they've given me Professor Snape as backup, and he's competent. We got Greg out. Greg doesn't have stages. I didn't think you thought that about your parents. Draco seemed to have no comment about that. What changed your mind? Two things. I always thought the Dark Lord's return would be glorious. Instead, his new world is just, I can't see myself at the top of it, not really. Not without becoming someone really different, and I don't want to. The other thing is, I know you. I think you're going to win. It had never consciously occurred to Harry to think he was going to win, though now that he thought about it, he'd quite like to. Draco glanced over at him, a strange light in his pale eyes. So, chosen one, are you going to win? Well, yeah. I don't have a choice, do I? Harry stared at the lake, as if it might have answers. You know, if Dumbledore has a grand plan to deal with you, we're going to feel pretty stupid. If Dumbledore has a grand plan to deal with me, I might as well jump into the lake and pick a fight with the giant squid. He probably does. My life is awful. Could be worse, Harry said dryly. Could be yours, oh famous and popular one. But I was guessing about what the grand evil plan was. It's killing someone, I think, if the necklace was any clue. So, as for who he'd want to kill, is he trying to murder you in a plausibly deniable way? Quite possibly. Well, that was terrible. He said he had faith in me, Harry, that everyone else would doubt me, but that he knew I could do it. He has a way of making you feel special, yeah. He makes everyone feel like they're his most special friend, right up until he's putting them in the ground. Maybe Dumbledore's grand plan is to dodge. Draco snickered. But you have a plan you haven't told Professor Snape, a plan that isn't stupid. One you can activate if you feel you have to, something that's taking longer than you thought. You haven't told Professor Snape because you don't trust him. Do you know what he vowed? To protect me, to help me. I asked Mother. The problem is, protecting you and helping you are two different things, aren't they? Under the circumstances, yes, and Professor Snape ending up dead is unacceptable. I'll talk to Hermione. You stall. Don't do anything stupid. In fact, don't do anything. Doing nothing would be great. Thanks, Harry, Draco drawled, and shifted into a little cat. See you at the. The cat flicked its tail at him and trotted away down the tower stairs. Chapter 104, Interlude, Draco, Spy Extraordinaire. Hermione thought that since she and Harry had had no luck getting any information out of Professor Snape, Draco should give it a try. He should be more confident in his occlumency and go for it. It had sounded so reasonable when she'd said it. Draco, personally, would rather go bathing with sharks than confront an adult Death Eater in his lair, but he'd said he'd try it their way. So he'd try it. There was, at least, an unbreakable vow in place to keep Professor Snape from attacking him. He shifted Cat for the walk up to Professor Snape's office, because stray thoughts didn't bounce around his head that much this way. He was going to go see the man who sometimes had fish. Maybe he would have fish. Draco nosed the door open and padded inside the office. The fire was lit and warm, diverting Draco from his planned outing to sit by it and bask. He was cold lately. "Mr. Malfoy," Professor Snape said, "this is not your common room." Draco decided to ignore this and lie down on the hearth. The warmth had seeped into the surface beneath him. It was wonderful. There was a ceramic click. Draco flicked an ear and opened one eye. It was a small saucer of sardines. "Best, Professor." Draco ate quickly and neatly and licked his lips for a moment before padding away from the fire and shifting. "You are overindulging your feline instincts," Professor Snape said mildly. Draco sank into his most lazy, arrogant persona and shrugged. "I haven't had a problem so far, Professor." "Be that as it may, did you have a question for me?" "A few. You said you'd help, and Mother said I should ask you for help. I still don't think I need it." "You are arrogant. Very well. Tell me your plans." "I'm not worried about my plan. I'm worried about you. I want to know what your orders are. I don't want us running into each other in the dark." Professor Snape's eyes narrowed. It was very uncomfortable not being on Professor Snape's good side. Truly it was. "Sit down." Draco sat in the chair, obedience a habit. "I have no orders regarding your mission. I have promised to protect you, assist you, and if necessary, complete the mission so that you will not be punished for failure." "You think it will be necessary," Draco said, trying not to bristle and failing. "You think I'm weak. You are an amateur, making amateur mistakes. As I told you, if you expect to succeed, you will rely on those older and wiser than you. He thinks I can do it. He has faith in me. You think I'll fail him?" Draco allowed his eyes to narrow. "You don't know me very well." Snape snorted. "You are many years too young to intimidate me. My priority is the completion of his designs." "Then why did he ask me to watch you?" Draco asked abruptly, forgetting his own script. Professor Snape smiled thinly. "I have been asked to keep an eye on you as well. It is a standard practice of his to keep us focused." Draco found that all too plausible. "I have another question, Professor. What do you think of the headmaster?" Professor Snape studied him through lidded eyes. "He is a trusting fool and a dangerous opponent. Do you think he suspects anything?" Professor Dumbledore is seldom at Hogwarts, and so has had few opportunities to notice anything amiss. Still, it does not do to underestimate him. There was something about that. Draco would think about it later. "I spoke harshly to you the night of Professor Slughorn's Christmas party." "No, Professor," and here Draco was on firmer ground, "it was I who should apologize. I was careless that night. I usually do have backup and an alibi. I'm not a complete idiot. I'm not going to stab myself with my own wand, sir." "I would feel more comfortable if you shared more details of these friends of yours." "I have reasonable confidence in the occlumency Aunt Bella's been teaching me, sir. I don't know about yours. Best not to trouble you." "You did not used to be so much trouble." "I used to be able to write my father for advice, sir. There's been an adjustment period. We will all have him back soon enough." "Yes, sir, and I will have grown up in the meantime. I don't know if he'll be pleased." "I don't follow." "Well, you see, sir, speaking of glory as we did the other day, I'd very much prefer for him to be remembered as my father, rather than me being remembered as his son. I think he holds the opposite view." Professor Snape rolled his eyes, which Draco appreciated. He'd been trying for a joke. "When you are ready, come to me, and we will discuss your plan. I'm certain there are aspects of it that are salvageable." Draco stood, bowed shallowly, and left. Once he was in the hallway, he had a series of thoughts, occluding that hard rather hurt. He had no idea why Harry trusted Professor Snape one drop. Professor Dumbledore was going to die. Draco doubted Harry would be happy with any of those conclusions, but he was rather proud of himself, rather good for his first turn at spying. Chapter 105. Hermione Employs Logic. Knowing what was wrong with Draco was actually far more stressful than at knowing what was wrong with Draco. Harry almost wished he had the mystery back. He could, he supposed, probably manage to get Draco arrested for what he'd done to Katie. But it seemed to Harry that throwing Draco in with Dementors would not actually help anyone if Draco had turned over a new leaf and was going to really stop being awful. That's what Dumbledore had done with Professor Snape, wasn't it? Harry was rather cross that he'd managed to tell adults about the whole situation and still the ones stuck dealing with it. Harry was infected enough with Draco-style madness to contemplate the Order of the Stag that let you join before 17 and stood for goodness and justice and proper potion ingredient storage, before remembering with some relief that Hewsant Draco and he didn't have to think that way. He could think like Harry Potter, who thought adults were faintly useless and not entirely trustworthy when it came to things like remembering kids could do stuff and telling them things they had a right to know. He didn't have to be a miniature Tom Riddle, surrounding himself with the fearful and the sadistic because they thought he was powerful. It could be simple. Draco was being ordered to kill someone. Draco didn't want to kill them. Therefore, Draco was in trouble, and Harry helped people who were in trouble when they were right in front of his face, no matter what he promised Professor Snape. Harry managed to keep this calm outlook for about a week, before Hermione spent an entire day crying. Even Ron was pulled away from Lavender Brown's embrace to try to coax her into talking about whatever was wrong, but she wouldn't, not to Ron or Harry or anyone. Eventually, Sunday night, with the common room finally empty, she confided to Harry, "It's just, I figured it out. Dumbledore's plan. Oh, Harry. You need to tell me." "No, I don't, because you'd act differently, and I think it's a secret, a really big secret. I can't. She burst into tears again. Harry, who had already tried hugging her, sat helplessly. "I think I know all the pieces now," she said thickly. "So we can get it all sorted out, according to plan. But oh, Harry. You have to talk to someone," Harry tried. "No, not about this. Not now. I'll tell you after. Later. I just worked it out. It's like Professor Snape's logic puzzle first year. Wizards never do have any logic." She wiped her eyes, furiously. "Oh, I can't believe." Harry waited eagerly to see if this would lead to a revelation, and was disappointed when she trailed off into silence again. She trailed off again. "I think I'll have some things to say to the Durr and to Draco. Harry, I'm afraid I can't think of anything you can help with." Harry sighed. "I suppose I'll just have more time for working on Wolfsbane then. Professor Snape said he'd supervise a first attempt." "Good, that's good." Harry was going to find out whoever's fault this was and kill them. It was probably Voldemort somehow, so no change there. Hermione burst into tears in defense against the dark arts at their first class of the week. "What is wrong with you, you fool girl?" snarled Snape. "I hate you. You're a terrible teacher, and you grade everyone unfairly, and. She continued crying. Harry jumped to his feet. "Hermione needs to go to the hospital wing, sir. Sorry, sir." He and Ron grabbed Hermione and dragged her from the room even as Professor Snape was snarling out their point loss. Harry got detention. He did not care. Professor Snape asked what was wrong with her at detention, to which Harry could only say, "I think it's a girl thing, sir." This did not improve Professor Snape's temper. Lavender didn't like how much time Ron was spending with Hermione, but Ron completely failed to notice. This was not good for Ron's relationship with Lavender. Ron failed to notice. The meeting with the Durr went something like this, in between practicing further nonverbal casting and other dueling practice. Hermione spun it as a theoretical exercise, though very few people were fooled when her theoretical problem was Death Eaters gaining access to Hogwarts and how to get all the students to their dorms. and who would stay and fight. Somehow it was agreed that they would split up by houses, which left Draco and Greg on their own team, which made Draco smile thinly. The others who said they weren't hiding, not ever, were predictable. Susan Bones, Hannah Abbott, Neville Longbottom, and others who had lost relatives or parents in this war or the last. Others were delegated to guarding the dormitories, Luna and Ginny among them. Harry didn't mind that the younger students were all assigned guard duty. It was all probably useless, but Harry and Hermione and Ron, now that he was paying attention and realizing there was a problem, were all feeling particularly useless. The only things they could really do was practice their magic and speculate about the war. Hermione threw herself back into research about Horcruxes and threw Harry back into the problem of Professor Slughorn, with a fierce gleam in her eye that told Harry he did not have a choice in the matter. Ron, meanwhile, was functionally the Quidditch captain, though Harry called tactics sometimes, and Harry found that giving Ron more chances to think through plays, as if they were chess matches, really helped him settle down on the field. Harry's first attempt at Wolfsbane melted his cauldron and half his hand. Harry spent half a week in the hospital wing and pretended he'd fallen off a broomstick. "Harry," Hermione said abruptly, as they walked to herbology a few days later, "Dumbledore's the secret keeper for Sirius House, right?" She made a note on a list written in some sort of terrifying code and moved away. Harry watched her go warily. Ron never did need to be prevented from declaring his undying love of Romuald Vane. Draco never became desperate enough to try to poison Dumbledore through a bottle of mead. But Hagrid still overheard Snape and Dumbledore talking, and Snape saying he didn't want to follow through on a task, and he told Ron, Hermione, and Harry. More than anything, this puzzled Ron and Harry, who still didn't have the whole picture. For Hermione, who had more of the picture than anyone else, it was horrifying. Chapter 106, What They Say About Unicorns. Harry's second attempt at Wolfsbane, once more tucked away in a quiet, unused potions lab Professor Snape had directed him to, didn't melt anything. However, after a month's effort, Professor Snape inspected the steaming black liquid closely and said, "You've successfully managed to kill your werewolf, Potter. Congratulations." Harry was very tempted to throw something. "I don't have a use for a caustic poison. Do you, Professor?" "If I did, I would make my own." "Right," Harry said glumly. "Many potion masters do not come so close as you have come, Potter. Cease your moping." "I'm not moping about that." "Then what, pray tell, is the problem?" "Hermione won't tell me." "Then it's a boy." "She and Ron are in love and won't admit it, and he's dating Lavender," Harry said impatiently. "No, it's not that." "You are being obscure," Professor Snape said, moving around through post-potions failure cleanup. "If this is because I asked you to leave order business well enough alone, I do not appreciate it." "Yeah, I failed miserably at that. I'm nosy." "Of that, I am aware." "Sirius met a girl," Harry said, in a blatant attempt to change the subject. "She's a muggle, and she thinks he's dashing, apparently." "Why would you ever think I wish to know that?" "So you could deplore him," Harry said happily. "I know it's a sad day for you when you can't deplore him." "Despise, the word is despise." "That too." After which they fell into quite predictable bickering. It was comfortable, familiar, and didn't really get them any closer to bridging the gap that had been caused by the Department of Mysteries the previous year. Harry managed to avoid the hospital wing after the game against Hufflepuff. Luna commentated, and Greg got into a boatload of fights about her performance, which he maintained was grand. Harry was not quite sure how they worked, but Greg was entirely devoted to the concept, and to the concept of the Rotfang conspiracy. Dean Thomas and Ginny were still dating, but Ron and Lavender Brown were not. The problem with Horace Slughorn was that Horace Slughorn was not easy to manipulate, even if you were a born manipulator, which Harry was not. And Harry was not naturally talented at being two places at once, either, and Horace Slughorn had a talent for avoiding a student he knew had a busy schedule. So Professor Dumbledore only made Harry feel guilty about failing to obtain the memory. "What's Sectum Sempra?" Harry asked, during what had become routine panicked moments to drop by the potions lab to stare at his third batch of wolfsbane. This time he would get it right, because Professor Snape had said some unsubtle snide things about the expense of the ingredients and Harry's care for his work. "A dark curse," Professor Snape said very mildly. "A cutting curse. It will not send you to Azkaban, but as its inventor, I must request you forget it exists." Right, Professor Snape, still pretty evil. Professor Snape would probably just terrify Professor Slughorn into giving up the memory, but Harry had never quite gotten the hang of being terrifying. The blackness of Harry's wolfsbane had been broken by blue specks halfway through its brewing, and just now the smoke from it had finally turned blue. Harry gestured Professor Snape forward from where he had been watching, perching like a crow at the back of the lab. Professor Snape hadn't been Hilpinth's time exactly, but he'd been hovering and yelling at Harry whenever Harry was going to ruin things, which was often. "Formalities aside, Harry," Professor Snape said, "this is a masterwork. I suggest you bottle it for your werewolf." It won't kill him. I cannot say I would care over much if it did, but no, it's acceptable." Harry had the weird and terrifying impulse to hug his teacher. He resisted it. "A masterwork. Your apprenticeship is not over, because I have higher standards than this. You have yet to create a fully original potion. Still, your basic skills are nothing to be ashamed of. It'd kill you to give me a straight compliment, wouldn't it?" "Most likely." In another universe, Draco confided in moaning Myrtle. In this universe he did too, because some things you don't share with enemies or even allies, crying, being bullied, weakness. Hermione was going a bit mad trying to get Harry and Ron to perfect apparition. Harry, who did not really have time, was happy to point out that he was too young anyway. Ron, however, took it more to heart, though he confided to Harry it was more to avoid Hermione crying again than anything else. Harry was pleasantly distracted by the sight of two cats, one white and tiny, one tabby, sitting by the edge of the lake, staring at rocks. One set of rocks turned easily between colors, and the other cat's set, Draco's set, slowly turned purple over the course of half an hour. Draco, Harry thought, was getting pretty scary. Harry was quite glad they were on the same side now. Aragog died, and Ron and Hermione gave Harry the idea to use Felix Felicis to deal with Professor Slughorn. Harry didn't tell them he'd been saving it, because he had a horrible feeling that Professor Snape would require him to make his own next time he wanted some, and Harry was having a hard time putting up with Professor Snape this year. Professor Snape was much less fun as a defense teacher than he'd been as a potions teacher. Harry drank a few hours of Felix Felicis. Among other things, he got Ron and Lavender, Ginny and Dean Thomas to break up, got a memory from Slughorn, and this. "You are being weak," Professor Snape hissed to Draco in a side corridor. Draco and Professor Snape were glaring at each other again. Harry, invisible, paused to put a comforting hand on Draco's shoulder before moving on with his errand. Behind him, Draco straightened his shoulders. "I know, sir. I'm not a very strong person, but I'm doing my best for you, sir. I really am." "Yes, sir. I don't want to give you more work to do, so I'm going to take care of it. It's just tricky." Timing, intent. Professor Snape's eyes were shadowed. "You are still a child. No one will be pleased if you ruin yourself over this, Draco." "Thanks for saying that, sir. Excuse me." The memory of Slughorns, of course, led to a discussion of Horcruxes. "I believe, Harry, that the locket Sirius Black destroyed to his peril was also a Horcrux, though I do not believe Voldemort is yet aware of its destruction, or his wrath would be great. This is part of why I have kept Sirius away from the wizarding world. for I believe he is in the most danger of any of my agents should he come into contact with the Death Eaters. They seek him fiercely. Harry, if he was being honest with himself, thought that love and being pure of heart was a crap superpower. He'd much rather be able to fly. It was better than no superpower at all, but he thought it a little strange that so few wizards could say that they were pure of heart. Ron, who he was confiding in because Hermione was chained to the library these days when she wasn't practicing spells, laughed at him. "Ron," Harry protested, "I'm being serious." "It's just, that's what people say about unicorns," Ron said, and laughed at him some more. Ron's impulse to whinny at him over the next few days was not appreciated. It was made worse by Ron cornering him during a free period and asking him, "So, about Ginny?" "Professor Snape says I can't date and have a potions apprenticeship at the same time," Harry said, trying to keep his voice flat and not wistful. Ron looked faintly relieved and then whinnied. Chapter 107. Greg is happy, Draco is not. "Can you check this?" Greg asked Harry, one evening in the library. Harry accepted the piece of paper with some trepidation. Greg had been odd all year, alternatively sticking as usual to Luna's side and disappearing for hours with Draco. "Dear Mother, thank you for your letter disowning me at my emancipation hearing. I am proposing on Saturday and have got permission from Professor Snape for you to witness it. I have permission from her father. Yours sincerely." Harry looked up at Greg. "How long have you been working on this?" "Couple months." "It's very grammatical." Greg looked rather worried. "That means it's good. She disowned you." Greg nodded. "But you want her to meet Luna?" Greg shrugged. "I'd like to be there, to witness the happy occasion, and join in any fights to the death." Greg grinned. "What about, your father? Should you put in anything about him?" "I wasn't sure." "Is he wanted by the ministry?" "Not yet." "I'll put in a bit about him," Greg decided. Shortly, Harry had the letter to read again. "P.S. Father is invited too, if he is not busy, and there are no open arrest warrants for him." Well, Harry thought faintly, this should be exciting. By complete coincidence, the entire gathered in a loose circle in the great hall as lunchtime came to an end on Saturday, playing a game of batting balls back and forth with their wands wordlessly, when Professor Snape escorted Mr. and Mrs. Goyle into the room. The staff table seemed oddly full as well, and Professor McGonagall in particular was watching the proceedings like a cat at a mouse hole. The dust ceased their game and loitered, pointedly. Harry, who felt he might ruin the moment by being obtrusive, was under his invisibility cloak. Luna, the only person in the entire who didn't know what was going on, blinked dreamily at the room. Greg knelt in front of her. The rest of the school craned to watch the drama. "Luna, would you marry me, please? It would be," Greg checked a piece of paper in his hand, "my great honor and privation." "Privilege," Draco hissed from where he was sitting a few feet away. "Privilege," Greg plowed on, "if you would be my wife forever. Because you are," he checked his notes, "the most beautiful and clever girl I've ever met, and to defeat the Rotfang conspiracy together." Harry put the hand he didn't have holding his wand over his mouth, to avoid making any noise and ruining the moment. "If you say yes, you get this ring," Greg concluded, offering Luna a silver ring set with an emerald, "and I'll make sure no one ever steals it." Harry, who had seen Draco laboring over something silver and green at odd moments over the past week, had a strong suspicion who had transfigured that particular object into its current shape. "I think that would be very nice," Luna agreed and slipped the ring on. "But you look very uncomfortable, so you should get up." Greg lumbered to his feet, beaming. "Your name, girl?" barked Mr. Goyle, largely forgotten, which was a trick and a half, given the size of Mr. Goyle. "This is Luna Lovegood," Greg said. Mrs. Goyle whispered in Mr. Goyle's ear. Harry raised his wand, just in case hexing was needed. Mr. Goyle made a hmfing noise and turned and left. Harry let out a slow breath. Mrs. Goyle lingered to talk to the happy couple, but Harry figured anyone could watch them. He followed Mr. Goyle and Professor Snape. "Dark Lord's getting impatient," Mr. Goyle said to Snape. "Not here, you fool," Snape hissed, "and he has never been known for his patience in any case." "Your neck." "So it is. If he asks, tell him he would be impressed with Draco's attitude." For the next week, Luna wore turnip earrings that matched her new emerald ring and a necklace of green and white fishing baubles. Moaning Myrtle popped out of a wall in front of Harry as he was walking down to dinner alone one day. Harry, he says he'll only talk to you. Is it true you kiss sometimes?" Her expression was avid. Harry closed his eyes and counted to 10. "I've never kissed Draco," he said. "Where is he?" Myrtle tilted her head at him, silent and smiling oddly. "We've gone up to the astronomy tower a few times," Harry muttered. "Now where is he?" "Oh, you must tell me next time so I can watch." She twirled upside down and led the way to a boys' bathroom a few floors away. Chattering about pretty boys and sensitivity, Andy read a comic book like this once. Draco was standing at the sink, staring at his hands, which were white-knuckled, clutching the porcelain. "Myrtle," Harry said, "can you give us a few minutes?" "Privacy, Myrtle." She withdrew through the floor, pouting. "Draco," Harry asked, casting a few anti-eavesdropper spells. "I can't do it. Everyone's counting on me, and I can't do it. I thought, but it's not working. You're right, I'm completely useless." "Hey," Harry said sharply. "None of that. I mean, I don't know what you're working on, but come on. You're almost as clever as Hermione, aren't you? And you've got her to ask if you have to." "He's going to kill me if I fail, and I'm failing. I'm running out of time, Harry." Harry leaned against the sink and studied Draco's pale, drawn face, with signs of sleep deprivation and tears. He dug in his pocket. "Chocolate." Draco hissed at him. "They're just chocolates. I figured someday I want to give someone some candy without drugging them. Today seems to be the day." Draco accepted one gingerly, ate it, and copied Harry's carefully casual posture, leaning against the side of a bathroom stall. "What you're missing," Harry said thoughtfully, "is you can trust people outside your family to care about you. I'm your friend. Professor Snape wants to look after you. We're not going to let you get killed, all right. I'll go ahead with plan and kidnap you and lock you in a closet until the war's over if I have to." Draco looked rather wistful. "And you don't trust the Order, but they'd help you too," Harry plowed on. "Even Dumbledore. Can I be blunt?" "You weren't already," Draco said, with a choked laugh. Draco rubbed at his eyes. Harry supposed they were itchy, what with all that not-crying Draco was doing. "You're not a fighter. I mean, you're a bit of a bully, but you don't like fighting. No one should be recruiting you for a war, except as a healer or a builder of fortifications. We don't get what we want." "Well, what I want is for you not to die, and I'm going to get it. With my, how'd I put it before? Very special boy who lived magic powers, I think," Draco said softly. "Right with those. Ron reckons I'm a unicorn." "Dosh," Draco murmured. "Whinnies at me in the halls. You're just trying to cheer me up." "Yep, so. I think I can manage a nice ambulatory unicorn to follow you around for a week by dinner time," Draco mused. Harry grinned. "I'm going to hex you in the face, Malfoy." "As if, Potter." Draco enchanted a handsome statue of a unicorn to follow Harry around and wicker at inconvenient moments. Ron high-fived him, which made Draco and Ron stare at each other and then look away at the same time. If Harry had to guess, he'd guess they'd decided to pretend it never happened. Chapter 108. Draco tries to do the right thing. The team won the match and the Quidditch Cup, But Harry did not kiss Ginny at the end of it, at least in part because a large white stone unicorn knocked him over in the middle of the moment. "I want to talk to you, Harry," Hermione said, dropping into a seat next to him in the common room. Harry eyed her. "I think we should be recruiting. Professor McGonagall would be a good choice." "She'll kill us," Harry pointed out, "for getting involved in things when we should be studying." "I don't care." Harry shoved his glasses up his nose and tried to figure out if Hermione was still sane. Her expression told him nothing except that she was fierce, which he already knew. "She won't go against Dumbledore," Harry settled on. "Not for me, not for anyone." "Can you think of anyone in the Order who would?" "Sirius, I suppose, if I asked." "Then we start with him this summer," Hermione said firmly. Harry eyed her and tried to decide if he wanted to wrestle the truth out of her. "I've got to get back to the library," she declared, and stood again. Hermione, Harry decided, was a very frustrating leader to have. Slightly less frustrating than Dumbledore, though. At least she told him where she was going when she vanished. Professor Trelawney tried to hide her whiskey in the room of requirement, and Harry asked her about it. While he had not been stalking Draco so closely this year, he nonetheless made the connection between a mysteriously happy person hiding in the room of requirements with Draco, who tended to keep obsessive track of the schedule and would, if found coming along the 7th floor corridor, say he'd been doing extra to practice with Greg. He couldn't resist the opportunity to see what Dumbledore would say to Atecher reporting Draco was up to something. Call him nosy, call him overprotective, call him whatever you want. But then we were rudely interrupted by Severus Snape. The words echoed in his head over and over. Severus Snape overheard the prophecy. Severus Snape told Voldemort. The whole world was topsy-turvy, and nothing made sense. How could? Professor Dumbledore's words about why Professor Snape had done it didn't matter, not really, because it was Snape Harry wanted to talk to, him Harry wanted to say something that would make it better, and Harry didn't think that would ever happen. So Harry heard the explanation, shrugged, and didn't try to tell Dumbledore to do something about Snape and Draco. Hermione said Harry's job was Horcruxes. Harry's job was Horcruxes. Harry had just a few minutes to tell Hermione, "He's done it, whatever it is. Draco. So you need to work out the timing on how this isn't going to work out awfully now, because it's happening." He left her there, looking pale as a ghost, and raced to follow Dumbledore. Harry was successfully distracted by the possibility of a Horcrux, though Harry would never forgive himself that it was just the other end of the puzzle that led to the locket in Sirius' house. And then he was back at Hogsmeade, and no longer distracted. Professor Snape had warned him, hadn't he, years ago, that it would be the last thing Harry's parents would want, for Harry to look up to him, for Harry to see him as, that it would be a betrayal of their memories, that Harry had betrayed their memories. He'd warned Harry, and Harry had kept blithely on, like an idiot, like a child. It was time, Harry thought grimly, to grow up. Professor Dumbledore wanted Snape. Well, Harry wanted to talk to him too. Then they saw the dark mark above the school, and Harry had a vivid, distracting flashback of last summer at Privet Drive. This time, he wasn't running away. "You swore to obey me, Harry. Go." Harry hurried over to the door leading to the spiral staircase, but his hand had only just closed upon the iron ring of the door when he heard running footsteps on the other side. He looked round at Dumbledore, who gestured to him to retreat. Harry backed away, drawing his wand as he did so. The door burst open, and somebody erupted through it and shouted, "Expelliarmus!" Harry's body became instantly rigid and immobile, and he felt himself fall back against the tower wall, propped like an unsteady statue, unable to move or speak. He could not understand how it had happened. Expelliarmus was not a freezing charm. Then, by the light of the mark, he saw Dumbledore's wand flying in an arc over the edge of the ramparts, and understood. Dumbledore had wordlessly immobilized Harry, and the second he had taken to perform the spell had cost him the chance of defending himself. Standing against the ramparts, very white in the face, Dumbledore still showed no sign of panic or distress. He merely looked across at his disarmer and said, "Good evening, Draco." Draco stepped forwards, glancing around quickly to check that he and Dumbledore were alone. His eyes fell upon the second broom. "Who else is here? A question I might ask you, or are you acting alone?" Harry saw Draco's pale eyes shift back to Dumbledore in the greenish glare of the mark. "No," he said. "I've got backup. There are Death Eaters here in your school tonight." "Well, well," said Dumbledore, as though Draco was showing him an ambitious homework project. "Very good indeed. You found a way to let them in, did you?" "Yeah," Draco's breath was coming in gasps, his eyes wild. "But we won't be interrupted, not yet. I've got time." "Well then, you must get on and do it, my dear boy," said Dumbledore softly. There was silence. Harry stood imprisoned within his own invisible, paralyzed body, staring at the two of them, his ears straining to hear sounds of the Death Eater's distant fight. And in front of him, Draco Malfoy did nothing but stare at Albus Dumbledore, who, incredibly, smiled. "Draco, Draco, you are not a killer." Draco bared his teeth in a wordless snarl. "Who cares what I am? I have a job to do. Someone has to put you down. It should be me. I should have the glory and the. Forgive me, Draco, but your attempts to kill me so far this year have been quite feeble. I must wonder if your heart is in it. Are you trying to provoke me?" "No, Draco," Dumbledore said very gently. "But you should, perhaps, get on with it. What if your accomplices are delayed? Indeed, I am curious how you managed to penetrate Hogwarts' defenses." "I'm not narrating my plan for Potter, Professor," Draco said with a wild laugh. "I'm not stupid, no matter what you all think. Is he watching? Or has he gone downstairs to try to rescue all the innocent students?" "We're alone, Draco," Dumbledore said very gently. "You know what my problem is," Draco said aloud, wand steady on Dumbledore's heart. "My problem is I hate you. I didn't at the beginning of this year, but the more I got to know you in order to figure out what to do to kill you, the more I hated you. I try to clear my mind for the spell, and all I can think is I want you Tassifer. So I have a question before I do this. Why didn't you stop me? I'm not naive enough to think you didn't know about it." Dumbledore slid a little down the ramparts, the strength in his legs apparently fading, and Harry struggled fruitlessly, mutely, against the enchantment binding him. "As a matter of fact, I did," said Dumbledore. "I was sure it was you. Why didn't you stop me then?" Malfoy demanded. "I tried, Draco. Professor Snape has been keeping watch over you on my orders." "Avada Kedavra," Draco said, expression twisted with hate. "Nothing happened." Draco snarled again, silent and wordless. Harry remembered a whisper of a lecture, a spell performed with dispassion and focused intent. "Bloody eye, Kendathis." "You do not have to," Dumbledore said, very gently. I want to." Dumbledore asked a few questions, then about Draco's plans, and Draco answered distractedly. Harry could do nothing. "We decided to put the dark mark over the tower and get you to hurry up here to see who'd been killed," said Malfoy. "And it worked." "Well, yes and no," said Dumbledore. "But am I to take it, then, that nobody has been murdered?" "I am trying, Tarfagus." "Yes, I can see that you are. What have I done to so offend you?" "Something you haven't figured out, in your vaunted wisdom. Die curious." But Draco still did not try to cast the spell again. "There is little time, one way or another," said Dumbledore. "So let us discuss your options, Draco." "My options," said Malfoy loudly. "I'm standing here with a wand. I'm about to kill you." "My dear boy, let us have no more pretense about that. If you were going to kill me, you would have done it when you first disarmed me. You would not have stopped for this pleasant chat about ways and means." "I haven't got any options," said Malfoy, and he was suddenly as white as Dumbledore. I've got to do it. He'll kill me. He'll kill my whole family. I appreciate the difficulty of your position, said Dumbledore. Why else do you think I have not confronted you before now? Because I knew that you would have been murdered if Lord Voldemort realized that I suspected you. Malfoy winced at the sound of the name. I did not dare speak to you of the mission with which I knew you had been entrusted in case he used legilimency against you, continued Dumbledore. But now, at last, we can speak plainly to each other. No harm has been done. You have hurt nobody, though you are very lucky that your unintentional victim survived. I can help you, Draco. I know which side I'm on. I know what I have to do. Come over to the right side, Draco, and we can hide you more completely than you can possibly imagine. What is more, I can send members of the Order to your mother tonight to hide her likewise. Your father is safe at the moment in Azkaban. When the time comes, we can protect him too. Come over to the right side, Draco. You are not a killer. Malfoy stared at Dumbledore. I've had that offer before, Professor, Draco said conversationally. Harry offered to hide me in his closet until the war was over. I'll fight, thanks. I'm not a coward, no matter what anyone else thinks. Something in Dumbledore's eyes sharpened. Harry said that, did he? I regret very much that I did not take the time before now to discuss your situation in more detail with Harry. Worry about your own situation, old man.